I woke up that morning rehearsing sentences in my head like I was practicing lines for a play. We're not going to be just two anymore. You're going to be a dad. I tried them all out while brushing my teeth, while tying my hair up, even while stirring my coffee. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, and it wasn't just the caffeine. After everything we'd been through, late periods that turned into nothing, one positive test that ended with me bleeding on the bathroom floor, I honestly thought this day would never come. This time, though, the second pink line stayed. It held. It felt like life finally decided to be kind to me. On my lunch break, I ducked into a little baby store near my office, the kind I usually tried not to look at because it hurt too much. This time I walked in like I belonged there. I bought the tiniest pair of white baby socks I'd ever seen and a small gift box with a gold ribbon. The cashier smiled and said it was a beautiful gift, and I almost blurted out the whole story to her. On the way home, I kept imagining his face. I pictured him staring at the socks, his eyes filling with tears, pulling me into his arms, saying he didn't know he could love me more than he already did. I built this whole little movie in my head and believed it. I got home earlier than usual, still wearing that stupid, hopeful smile. The house was quiet, that soft, late afternoon kind of quiet, with the fridge humming and the faint smell of the vanilla candle I'd burned the night before. Something felt slightly off, but I brushed it away, telling myself I was just nervous. I put my bag on the couch, held the tiny box in my hand like it was made of glass, and headed to our bedroom. I wanted to leave it on his pillow, maybe set up my phone to record his reaction. I grabbed the laptop from the nightstand, thinking I'd clear some space for a video. When I opened it, the screen lit up on a paused image, our bed, our headboard, and two blurred shapes too close together. For a second, my brain refused to connect the dots. I don't know what made me press play, morbid curiosity, instinct, or the kind of denial that makes you believe your eyes are lying. But the moment the video moved, everything inside me froze. It was him, his hands, his voice, that low laugh I used to think was just for me, and her, leaning into him like she belonged there, like my bedroom, my sheets, my life were just some stage they'd rented for their performance. They were kissing with the ease of people who'd done it more than once. My legs went numb so fast I had to sit on the edge of the bed, and even that made me sick, because the sheets under me were the same ones in the video. I could still smell the detergent I used that morning. God, it felt like the room itself had betrayed me. I kept whispering, "No, no, no," like repetition could reverse reality. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely pause the screen. I stared at their blurry faces, trying to convince myself it was old, staged, something, anything, that wouldn't rip my entire life apart. But the timestamp sat in the corner like a punch to the throat. Last week, a Thursday, the exact night he told me he was too exhausted after a long meeting and fell asleep on the couch. He didn't fall asleep. He didn't even come home. He was here in our room with her. I felt this crushing pressure in my chest, like someone was standing on it, and for a terrifying moment, I thought the stress would hurt the baby. I pressed my palm against my stomach, whispering an apology to a life that was supposed to be welcomed with joy, not this. I don't remember breathing. I don't remember blinking. I just sat there, feeling the air change around me. It was like the room had become a crime scene, except the only body was mine, my old life, bleeding out quietly on the floor. I thought about how earlier that morning I danced around the apartment, thinking it would be one of the happiest days of my life. The contrast hit me like cold water poured down my spine. The reality was so sharp, so sudden, I felt almost disoriented, like time had split in half. On one side, the woman who walked in smiling. On the other, the woman who couldn't even stand up without her knees giving out. And somewhere between those two versions of me, there was this heavy, silent question forming. What the hell do I do now? I don't know how long I stayed in that spot, staring at a paused frame of the woman's hand on his chest, on my husband's chest, as if she had any right to touch what I'd spent years loving, forgiving, building a life with. The room felt colder, like the walls were slowly pulling away from me. I finally forced myself to stand because I felt this sudden wave of nausea, part pregnancy, part heartbreak. I stumbled to the bathroom sink and splashed water on my face, but the reflection staring back looked like someone who'd aged years in minutes. My eyes were already red, my cheeks blotchy, and I had that hollow, shocked expression people get when the floor disappears under them. I kept touching my stomach, almost obsessively, reminding myself I wasn't alone in my body, that I had to stay upright, stable, breathing. When I walked back into the bedroom, the laptop was still open, the frame frozen, taunting me. I couldn't bring myself to watch more, not yet. But I could feel something shifting inside me, like a gear clicking into a new position I didn't recognize. I'd always imagined betrayal would make me scream, break things, collapse into sobs on the floor. But instead, there was this strange, focused silence settling in my bones. I moved slowly, deliberately, picking up the tiny gift box with the baby socks and placing it inside my dresser drawer. The ribbon brushed my fingers, and I felt a sting of tears I forced myself to swallow. That moment, hiding the box, felt like burying the version of me who thought love alone could protect a family. I walked through the hallway, the house suddenly unfamiliar, every shadow sharper. I heard a car door outside. His. My breath hitched, not out of hope or fear, but something colder. Anticipation. I wiped my face, smoothed my hair, and practiced breathing evenly. He walked in a minute later, calling out a casual, "I'm home," like nothing in his world had shifted, like my entire life hadn't just detonated upstairs. And I stood there, listening to him drop his keys in the bowl, take off his shoes, sigh like he'd had a long day. I realized then that he didn't know anything had changed. Not for him. But for me? Oh, everything was different now. I turned toward the stairs, feeling something new settle inside me, something sharp, steady, and terrifyingly calm. And that's when I knew. Whatever happened next would not be the scene I had rehearsed that morning. I waited until his footsteps reached the kitchen before I finally moved, forcing my legs to carry me back upstairs like I hadn't just watched my marriage decay in real time. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs, but my mind felt disturbingly clear. I needed answers, not from him, not yet, but from the videos themselves. So I opened the folder again, hands trembling but steady enough to click. There were more files, not one, not two, 5. Each with different timestamps, different nights. I opened the second one, already bracing myself. This time she was sitting on the edge of the bed, laughing like she owned the place, like she'd done it before. And he was standing between her knees, touching her the same way he used to touch me when he wanted to pull me closer. Something inside me cracked so loudly I swear I felt it echo in my ears. I paused again and stared at the details, the little things people don't pay attention to unless they're desperately trying to hold themselves together. The lavender pillowcase I'd bought on sale last month, the mug on the nightstand, the one he always said made tea taste better. Even the shirt he was wearing, a navy blue one I ironed for him the day before that supposed late meeting. My breath turned shallow, and for a split second I thought I might faint. Seeing it all, seeing her in my space, wearing smugness like perfume, it wasn't just betrayal, it was desecration. I pressed my palm against my chest, the way my mother used to do when she was overwhelmed, but my hand just trembled uselessly. If pain had a physical weight, I swear it would have pinned me to the floor. I shut the laptop gently, not because I was calm, but because the rage rising inside me was so sharp it felt like if I slammed it shut, I would shatter. And I couldn't afford to shatter, not with the baby inside me. I whispered to myself, "Breathe, just breathe." But it felt like the air was made of needles. I walked toward the hallway, leaning against the doorframe for support. When I heard him downstairs opening the fridge, humming, completely oblivious, something in me hardened. He came home, poured himself a drink, and acted like an ordinary man with an ordinary life. Meanwhile, I was upstairs holding evidence that he'd thrown our entire world away. That contrast, his calm versus my collapse, made something in me shift from shock to cold clarity. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't confront him yet. I needed to see the full picture before I revealed that I already knew everything. I walked downstairs slowly, gripping the handrail because my legs still felt unsteady. He was leaning against the kitchen counter, scrolling on his phone like a man who had absolutely nothing to hide. When he looked up and smiled at me, that casual, familiar smile, my stomach twisted so violently I had to bite my tongue. He asked if I wanted dinner, said he could order something since he knew I'd been tired lately. Hearing him pretend to care felt like someone pressing on a bruise. And the worst part? I somehow managed to nod and say I wasn't hungry. My voice didn't even shake. He didn't notice a damn thing. That alone told me everything I needed to know about how disconnected he'd become, how far from me he'd drifted while I stayed loyal, naive, hopeful. As he talked about his day, some boring story about a coworker messing up a presentation, I studied him differently. The way he crossed his arms, the small fleck of perfume on his collar I hadn't noticed before, too sweet to be mine, the faint red scratch on his neck. It was like I was watching a stranger wearing my husband's face. He said something about being burnt out from work lately, and I almost laughed because I had seen exactly what had drained him last week, and it sure as hell wasn't spreadsheets. I felt this buzzing in my ears, anger mixed with heartbreak, like emotions were fighting for territory inside me. It took everything in me not to scream, not to say, "Burnt out? Really? Because you looked pretty energetic with her." He came closer, put his hand on my back, told me he missed how quiet and sweet things used to be between us. I think that was the moment something snapped. Quiet and sweet? He had the nerve to romanticize the marriage he was actively burning down. I pulled away gently, pretending I needed to grab something from upstairs, even though all I needed was distance to keep myself from exploding. As I climbed the stairs again, each step felt heavier, like my body was carrying the weight of every lie he'd told recently. And right there, halfway up, one clear thought rose above all the noise. If I was going to confront him one day, it wouldn't be blindly. I would know every detail, every timeline, every hidden truth before I opened my mouth. I reached the bedroom with the kind of shaky determination that comes from being pushed past your limit. The laptop was still there, sitting on the duvet like an open wound. But this time, instead of collapsing, I forced myself to sit and breathe through the nausea swirling inside me. I knew I needed to watch the rest, not because I wanted to torture myself, but because knowledge was the only weapon I had right now. So I opened the third video. This one was shorter, almost rushed, as if they hadn't even bothered to make themselves comfortable. She was wearing one of his shirts, my husband's shirt, and he was behind her, kissing her neck the way he used to kiss mine when he came home early and wanted to surprise me. My hands balled into fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. I scanned the timestamp again. A Sunday afternoon. The exact Sunday he told me he was going to help a friend fix a faucet. I remember I spent that day meal prepping for the week, humming to myself in the kitchen, completely oblivious to the fact that while I was chopping vegetables and planning dinners for us, he was upstairs in our bedroom with her. It was like my brain was displaying two parallel realities. One where I was the devoted wife waiting for her husband, and one where he was betraying me in the most intimate space we shared. The emotional whiplash was almost unbearable. I felt this deep, hollow ache forming inside my ribs, like grief settling in a place it planned to stay. I closed the folder after that. I couldn't watch more. Not yet. I needed a plan, not more pain. The air in the room felt stale, heavy with deceit, and I opened the window just to breathe something that didn't hurt. I stood there, gripping the windowsill, feeling the breeze on my face and trying to anchor myself. I knew I couldn't let him see any of this. Not my shaking, not my heartbreak, not the rage brewing under my skin. If he sensed anything, he'd cover his tracks, lie better, hide deeper. So I straightened myself, wiped my face, and practiced a neutral expression. When I heard him coming upstairs, calling my name lightly, I had already slipped the laptop shut. And by the time he stepped into the room, I had already decided. I would gather every truth before I ever confronted him. He wouldn't see my storm coming. Over the next few days, I became someone I barely recognized, quiet, observant, calculating. I moved through the house like a ghost, taking mental snapshots of everything he touched, everywhere he lingered, every item that seemed slightly out of place. My senses sharpened in ways I didn't know were possible. I could hear the faint vibration of his phone from across the room. I could smell a perfume on his jacket that definitely wasn't mine. Too floral, too young. And every time I caught something suspicious, a part of me winced, but another part, the part that had been forged in the moment I saw those videos, grew sharper, steadier. At night, when he fell asleep early, I would sit on the floor of the closet with the laptop, headphones in, watching his lies unfold on the screen. I couldn't watch everything at once. My stomach wouldn't allow it. But I studied details like I was piecing together evidence for a case. The way he held her. The angle of the camera. The timing of the videos. Little things I hadn't noticed before started forming a pattern, like puzzle pieces snapping into place. She wasn't someone he met randomly. She was someone he knew. Someone comfortable enough to move through my bedroom like she'd been there more than once. The realization hit me hard, but instead of breaking me, it steadied me. Whoever she was, she had a routine with him. A rhythm. And that meant there were other signs buried in my daily life. So I expanded my search. I checked jacket pockets, glanced at his phone when he left it face down, studied his credit card notifications, even looked through the laundry basket for clues. A stray hair, lipstick traces, a perfume-scented collar. I found little things, tiny red flags, a receipt for a cafe we'd never visited together, a hotel keycard from a place he claimed he'd never been, a text preview from a number saved only as a meaningless initial. Each discovery stung, but it also strengthened something in me, a resolve I didn't know I was capable of. I wasn't just a betrayed wife anymore, I was gathering ammunition. The deeper I dug, the clearer the pattern became. He wasn't being careless, he was being comfortable. That was the part that hurt the most. He was confident I'd never look, never question, never doubt him. He trusted my loyalty more than I ever should have trusted his. One afternoon, while he was in the shower, I opened his desk drawer under the pretense of looking for a pen. I found a small velvet pouch tucked beneath old receipts and tangled charging cables. Inside was a delicate gold necklace, definitely not my style. The pendant was shaped like a tiny moon. I held it between my fingers, and my throat tightened. He'd never bought me jewelry in years. He always said he didn't know what I liked anymore. Apparently, he'd learned what she liked just fine. I placed the necklace back exactly where I found it, lining it up with the dust mark so he wouldn't notice a thing. My heart was pounding so fast I felt nauseous, but the nausea wasn't just pregnancy, it was anger simmering under my skin. I could feel the baby flutter faintly, almost as if sensing the storm inside me. I rested my hand on my stomach, whispering silently to the tiny life I was protecting, promising that I wouldn't let this chaos touch us more than it already had. That small movement grounded me. It reminded me why I couldn't afford to react recklessly. I needed to stay level-headed, even if every cell in my body wanted to scream. That night, while he slept peacefully beside me, I slipped out of bed and sat on the hallway floor, scrolling through his email on the shared tablet. He'd forgotten to log out, a rookie mistake from a man who thought he was untouchable. That's where I found it, a confirmation for a weekend reservation at a boutique hotel. The reservation was for 2. The date? Last month. He had told me he was traveling for work, staying at a business-class hotel with terrible coffee and no room service. My vision blurred as the truth rearranged itself in my mind. He'd been with her on a romantic weekend while I stayed home worrying about delayed cycles and possible complications. My fingers trembled as I forwarded the email to myself. That was the moment something inside me clicked into place. Not rage, not heartbreak. Strategy. I wasn't collecting evidence anymore. I was preparing for war. The next morning I woke up feeling different. Not lighter, no, nothing about this felt light, but steadier, like the ground beneath me had finally stopped shifting. I knew what I had to do next. I called a lawyer, not from my phone, too risky, but from an old prepaid one I kept in a drawer for emergencies. When the lawyer picked up, I introduced myself in a low, controlled voice I didn't even recognize. She spoke calmly, professionally, asked me a few basic questions, but when I mentioned the videos taken in my own bedroom, her tone changed. She asked if I felt safe. I told her I wasn't in danger physically, but emotionally. I was standing in a minefield. She told me exactly what documents to prepare, what assets I had full rights to, what steps I could take without tipping him off. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of power return to my chest. After the call, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the folded baby socks still hidden in the drawer. The contrast hit me again. This tiny symbol of new life versus the rotting truth of my marriage. But instead of crying, I felt clarity sharpening inside me. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for the little life growing inside me, the one who deserved stability, safety, and a mother who wasn't drowning in someone else's lies. I placed my hand on my belly and made a silent promise. I would not bring my child into a home where deceit lived in the walls. I spent the rest of the afternoon organizing everything. I printed the hotel confirmation, saved screenshots of suspicious emails, copied the videos onto a flash drive, and hid it all in a place he'd never think to look. I moved with a kind of cold precision that felt foreign but necessary. Every step, every folder, every file was another brick in the foundation of the life I was preparing to rebuild, without him. I didn't know when I'd confront him. Not yet. But I knew this. When the moment came, he wouldn't see it coming. He'd think everything was normal, safe, predictable. And that false sense of security would be the last gift I ever gave him. I chose the night carefully. Too carefully, maybe. A calm Tuesday, the kind where nothing dramatic is supposed to happen. I made dinner earlier than usual, set the table neatly, even lit one of those soft candles he always said made the house feel cozy. I wasn't trying to seduce him or soften him. I was building a stage, a silent arena. I wanted him relaxed, unsuspecting, lulled into that comfort he'd taken for granted for far too long. My heart thudded beneath my ribs the whole time, but outwardly I moved with slow, methodical ease, the way someone does when they've rehearsed their lines 1,000 times. By the time he walked through the door, shaking off the cold, I'd already slipped into character. He kissed my cheek distractedly and said he was glad to come home to a peaceful house for once. The irony nearly made me choke. I watched him eat, watched him talk about work, watched him scroll his phone between bites like this was any ordinary night. But underneath the table, my knees were trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of anticipation. I wasn't scared of him anymore. I wasn't even scared of what came next. I was only scared of losing control, of breaking too soon, of letting emotions spill when I needed precision. I kept touching the edge of my plate, grounding myself in the cool ceramic. I reminded myself, you're not here to cry. You're here to end it. After dinner, I wiped my hands on a towel and asked him calmly if we could talk in the living room. He sighed, acting annoyed, as if deep conversations with a wife were this exhausting chore he was too busy for. He dropped onto the couch, leaned back, and asked, "Is this about you being stressed lately?" The way he said it, lazy, dismissive, almost bored, sent a cold shiver down my spine. I sat across from him, but I didn't speak immediately. I just watched him, really watched him. The man I had once trusted with every part of my life stared back at me, utterly unaware that his entire world was sitting on the edge of unraveling. And for the first time since this all began, I felt something close to calm settle over me. He had no idea what was coming, not even the faintest clue. He ran a hand through his hair, sighing dramatically, like I was about to nag him about chores or bills. "Can we not do this tonight?" he muttered, eyes already drifting toward his phone. "I've had a long day." The audacity of it almost made me laugh. A long day? I had spent weeks collecting proof of his betrayal while carrying his child, and he was tired? Instead of reacting, I reached into the drawer of the side table and took out the flash drive. A small, ordinary object, yet it carried the weight of every sleepless night, every tear I swallowed, every breath I forced myself to take for the baby. I set it on the coffee table gently, almost tenderly. He glanced at it, confused, not yet alarmed. "What's that?" I didn't answer. I simply picked up the remote and clicked the TV on. The screen lit up, and for a second the room was silent except for the low hum of the sound bar. Then the first video began to play. Our bedroom, our sheets. His hands on her, his laugh with hers. The color drained from his face so fast it was like watching someone go into shock. He lunged forward to grab the remote, stuttering something about privacy and, "This isn't what you think." But I held a hand up, my voice low and razor steady as I said, "Sit. Down." He froze. I'd never spoken to him like that before. Never with authority. Never with finality. He sank back onto the couch, his breathing shallow, his eyes wide with the panic of a man who realized he'd miscalculated the one person he should have feared losing. He started talking, fast, sloppy, desperate. He said he didn't know how the videos got there. He said it was old. He said it was meaningless. Then he said it only happened once, then twice. Then he blamed stress. Then he blamed me. He said I'd been emotionally distant, that he'd felt lonely, that he'd made a stupid mistake. Every lie dug his grave deeper. I just watched him unravel, watched the guilt pour out of him in every inconsistent sentence, every pathetic attempt at control. And then, when he finally paused to catch his breath, I spoke. "Do you know what day I found these?" I asked quietly. He blinked, confused. "The day I was going to tell you I'm pregnant." The words hit him like a physical slap. His mouth fell open, and he made this strangled sound, as if he couldn't decide whether to cry or collapse. For a moment, he just stared at me, like he was trying to process two realities at once, the one where he'd been caught cheating and the one where he was supposed to become a father. His face twisted into something pathetic and frantic, and he reached for me, saying my name like it was a lifeline. He said he was shocked, that he couldn't believe it, that this changed everything. But the way he said it, it wasn't joy, it was panic. Panic that his double life was crashing down at the worst possible moment. I stepped back before he could touch me. My whole body recoiled instinctively. I didn't want his hands on me. Not now, not ever again. His palms hovered in the air uselessly before he let them drop. He started begging then, real begging, knees on the carpet, hands clasped, voice cracking. He said he loved me. He said he wanted our family. He said she meant nothing. He promised he would cut ties immediately. He swore he'd go to therapy, delete numbers, change routines, anything I wanted. It was like watching a man bargain for his own life. But underneath the desperation, I could still see the man from the videos, the man who kissed another woman in our bed, who whispered things into her neck, who thought I'd never find out because I'd always been too trusting. His tears didn't move me. If anything, they made me colder, because I knew exactly what he wasn't crying for. Me, the baby, the family. He was mourning the loss of his comfort, his convenience, the life where he could have both women without consequences. I waited until his sobbing softened into ragged breaths. Then I walked to the hallway and returned with the folder the lawyer told me to prepare. I placed it on the coffee table next to the flash drive, two symbols of a life he'd never reclaim. His eyes darted between them, confusion turning to dread. What is that?" he whispered. I sat across from him, my posture straight, my voice calm. "It's everything you need to leave this house tonight," I told him. "My lawyer will handle the rest." He blinked rapidly, shaking his head as if refusing reality. "Leave? Tonight? You can't be serious." But I cut him off with a quiet finality that even surprised me. "I'm done." The words weren't loud, but they carried every ounce of agony, strength, and certainty inside me. And for the first time since I'd known him, he understood he had truly lost. The silence after he left that night didn't feel peaceful, not at first. It pressed against the walls like a heavy fog, thick and unfamiliar, making the house echo in ways I'd never noticed. I sat on the couch long after the door closed behind him, listening to the emptiness, feeling both relieved and hollow at the same time. My hands were still trembling, but the trembling wasn't fear anymore. It was release, like my body finally realized the danger was gone. Eventually, I pushed myself up and walked through the house slowly, flipping off lights, locking windows, moving with the soft caution of someone rearranging a life that had been shaken loose from its foundations. When I reached the bedroom, I hesitated at the doorway. The room felt tainted and sacred all at once. I walked to the bed and pulled off the sheets mechanically, folding them with a precision that bordered on ritual. Every fabric held his scent. Every wrinkle reminded me of where the truth had first broken open. I stripped the bed down to the mattress, trying not to think too much, trying not to let the anger seep back in. Then, when everything was bare, I sat on the edge and breathed deeply, pressing my hand against my belly for grounding. The baby fluttered lightly, almost like a reminder. Or reassurance. And in that small, gentle movement, something inside me softened. I wasn't alone. I wasn't broken. I wasn't abandoned. I was carrying a future he no longer had access to. The next morning, the house felt different. Still quiet, but less suffocating. I made myself tea, the kind with ginger that helped with nausea, and sat by the window watching people walk their dogs, jog, live their normal little lives. My world had turned upside down, yet outside everything continued. The contrast stung in a strange way, humbling, grounding, almost comforting. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and let myself breathe for a moment without urgency, without pretending, without strategizing. That first sip hit something deep inside my chest, a reminder that small comforts still existed. And as I watched the sunlight creep across the floor, I realized something that surprised me. The worst part was over. What came next would hurt, yes, but it would be mine to rebuild, not his to ruin. Later that day, I opened the closet to put away some laundry, and for a moment I just stood there staring at the empty space where his clothes had been. It looked strange, too spacious, too organized, almost echoing. But instead of sadness, what I felt was a strange, quiet disbelief, like I'd walked into someone else's life by accident. I ran my fingers along the wooden hanger rods, remembering how many times I'd hung his shirts, straightened his jackets, tucked his sweaters away neatly. All those small acts of care I'd done automatically, without thinking, because that's what love looked like to me. Now the closet was a different kind of symbol, one of absence, yes, but also of possibility. A blank space is still a space. It can be filled with something better. I found one of his old t-shirts still wedged behind a shoebox, and instead of folding it, I sat on the floor, holding it in my hands. The fabric felt softer than I remembered, worn from years of use. But when I pressed it to my face, expecting maybe some wave of nostalgia or grief, nothing came. No tears, no longing. Just a dull, distant ache, like touching a bruise that no longer hurt. I realized then that I'd already begun detaching long before I confronted him. The betrayal had ripped the bond clean, but the healing had started quietly, in the hours I spent gathering truth and choosing myself. I set the shirt aside gently, not out of affection, but out of respect for the woman I had been, the one who loved him with everything she had. By afternoon, I found myself in the spare room, the one that had been half storage, half, we'll organize it someday. I flicked on the light and dust floated lazily through the sunbeam. Something about the untouched quiet of it made me pause. Without planning to, I placed my hand on my belly, feeling the faint, rhythmic flutter that had started happening more often lately, and it hit me with a clarity so sharp I almost gasped. This could be the baby's room. A small, simple thought, but it made my heart swell and crack at the same time. I took a slow breath, letting the idea settle in my chest. For the first time since the night everything fell apart, I felt a flicker of genuine warmth, a tiny flame of hope pushing up through the ash. A few days later, I sat down with my lawyer to finalize everything. She walked me through each document patiently, her voice calm and steady, so different from the chaos that had been living in my head. When she slid the final set of papers toward me, I stared at my name printed beside his, the black ink still crisp, still binding. My hand hovered for a second, trembling not from fear, but from the sheer weight of closing a chapter I once believed would last forever. Then I signed, one stroke at a time, clean, certain, permanent. When I handed the pen back, something inside me untangled, like a knot that had been there for years finally loosened. She congratulated me gently, told me I was strong, and for the first time, I actually believed her. That afternoon, I went home and opened the spare room again. The air felt lighter this time, as if the house itself had exhaled. I sat on the floor with a notebook, sketching ideas for paint colors, furniture, little decorations. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was just imagining. And it felt good. I pictured a soft green wall, a crib by the window, maybe a mobile with tiny stars. I pictured rocking in a chair with the baby against my chest, both of us safe, both of us starting fresh. The drawings were shaky. I've never been artistic, but they were filled with something I hadn't felt in a long time: intention, possibility, love that didn't require forgiveness or sacrifice. That night, as I settled into bed alone, I pulled the blanket around me and listened to the quiet. No tension, no forced conversations, no pretending. Just silence. A healing kind of silence. I pressed my hand over my belly, feeling that familiar, gentle movement from within. It brought tears to my eyes, but not the painful kind. These were warm, soft, almost cleansing. "It's just us now," I whispered, and saying it out loud didn't scare me. It comforted me. I realized I wasn't rebuilding without something. I was rebuilding toward something. A life shaped by truth, resilience, and a love that actually deserved to stay. And for the first time in weeks, I drifted to sleep with peace instead of dread.